we were talking before the podcast, before we started. So moved to Central New York. What the hell is happening in Central New York? Like, what do people do around here?
What is this place?
Yeah. Is that when you got into farming?
Yeah, so I met my wife when I was in Boston, and she brought me here to go into the family business, and I was doing computer work at the time, and I couldn't find a job, and at least a good one, and like, what do people do in Central New York? And agriculture came to mind. So
Yeah.
At that time, well, I've always been into beer, so let's get that straight.
Right.
And then I started homebrewing a little bit. So I started homebrewing. I thought it'd be cool to grow a couple hop vines on the side of our barn, and four plants led to right now about 6,000. So I kind of got into agriculture by love of beer.
Yeah. Had you been into agriculture and farming before that?
No, not at all. I have zero agriculture background, completely self-taught, and I think that was one of the advantages that I may have actually had, just because, you get the mentality, that's the way, we've always done it. And I don't like hearing that, so I've always just kind of marched to the beat of my own drum, and sometimes it's worked out well, other times not so much, but yeah, no formal training at all.
And so how that was? Did you say 10 years ago? 12 years ago?
Yeah, it was about 12 years ago now, I think. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I've kind of always been interested in it. I'm learning now that usually I'm going to try and get better at it. But usually the trajectory for me is, oh, that's really interesting. I'm going to do that, and then I do it. And then I immediately regret it because of the time consumption. The last thing was backyard chickens for that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of those and not had success.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, it's hard. To be completely honest, I think if I'd known how hard hop growing was and how labor intensive it was, I may not have done it. But it's great. It's kind of it's like problem solving, really. And it was kind of similar to the computer industry, where you have this big problem, and instead of sitting down and writing code to fix that problem, your tractor breaks down, and you got to fix it, or you have this mildew. Like, what do you do? So it's problem solving on a much larger scale, and instead of writing code, you get your hands dirty. So I've always had a little garden. Sometimes I kill those plants, some other times not so much, but. Hops, fortunately, they're almost like a weed, and they're almost invasive. So they are hard to kill. Huh. That was one of the things that kind of drew me to it. Like, well, even if I totally screw this up, it's highly doubt I'm going to kill these plants. So let's go for it.
What is it about hops that they follow the same kind of environment that grapes do? Is that right?
Yeah, hops grow in a bine, like our farmers call it the bine yard, or I say vineyard, and grapes grow on a vine, so they are very similar. But in terms of the ingredients, I just think the hop is the sexy ingredient in a beer. People talk about the hops; they're not talking about the yeast. They're not talking about the malts. They definitely don't talk about the water. It's the hops. It's the sexy ingredient.
Yeah. There's so much. We were. My wife and I were in Hawaii just before the pandemic, and we went on a tour of Kona Brewing, and talking about their massive distribution all across the country. And that was the first time it dawned on me, how do you make sure that it tastes the same? And then finding about like mineral packs and all that kind of stuff, that they have to make sure even the water is, mimics what they're doing there.
Breweries are almost, it's everyone thinks you sit around and you have a good time. Most of it's cleaning and sanitation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's probably the big thing with consistency.
Yeah, it's not an industry I would ever want to be in as an owner or maker. I don't think I have yet to meet a brewery owner that has said, "Man, this is the best decision I've ever made before."
I can believe that.
So you were home brewing before you got into that? What, like back in Boston, were you really into craft beer, or was it just kind of something that came up once you got here and had some time?
Kind of, it kind of, craft beer was just on the rise kind of when I came here, or at least it was for me. There were some craft breweries in Boston. My first craft brew experience takes me back to Vermont. I'm originally from Vermont. Magic Cat. That was,
Yeah.
the craft brewery back in the day. And my parents lived right down the street from Magic Cat. So
Oh, nice.
I remember going in there, as a young, 20-something, and going in and seeing a growler for the first time. And like, what do you mean? I can take this half-gallon glass jug, fill it full of beer, and leave with it? Like, this is awesome. So since then, I was kind of, intrigued by the craft beer.
Yeah.
But I didn't really get into it until I came out, here and saw a lot of the craft beer scene around in the Syracuse area.
I didn't really get into it until I started Eat Local. Drink, I would guess like a microbrew or craft brew every once in a while out at a restaurant or anything. But it wasn't really until maybe 3 years ago that I started to notice it. 4 years ago that I started to like notice it, and even just the tiniest bit. And I still don't know anything about it. In January or February, I started the wow, why am I going to blank on the name of this thing now? Cicerone course.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I got like halfway through certified beer server and stopped.
Yeah.
It was
difficult.
It was really interesting and exciting. And then I got to the history of, and I find that stuff fascinating, but it was just so many freaking dates and things to remember. But for like the solid 2 weeks that I was doing it, I was running down to Branching Out Bottle Shop and just, looking at every can and like, oh, I just read about that. I just read about this, and then going home and tasting it and kind of, making the connection between what I was reading and learning and the beer that I was drinking, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. The cool thing, in my opinion, about, American craft beer is really the lawlessness of it, right? Like if you're over in Germany and you have the purity laws where beer is, hops, water, yeast, and barley, and that's it.
Yeah.
Americans, they can do anything. You can change styles. So there's a lot of innovation coming out of America, at least in the last, couple decades, and that's kind of driven, I think, a lot of the growth. And as a Cicerone, that's hard, as you're trying to put things into certain categories. And some styles don't fit in those categories, but it also at the same time makes them very interesting.
Yeah. So what's your take on beer today? Is it, are you more of like a purist, or it doesn't sound like it? Are you more of a, wow, what crazy experiment did they just come up with?
I like everything, man. I've a palate. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a super sophisticated palate, but I really like flavors. I really like tastes. So having the American craft beer scene, I think it's all over the board, and I love it. It's actually my kind of why I got into the distribution space. Is it's in my opinion that the craft beer consumer's favorite beer is the one they haven't had yet. If you spend a lot of time in a tap room just as a fly on the wall, people come in, they sit down. First thing they ask, "What's new?" So it's people are constantly looking for what's different. And I just learned the other day of a new IPA style, the cold IPA now. So it's like a newer thing, and it's ever evolving. And that's kind of the cool thing about it is it's never stagnant. It's constantly there's constant innovation, and I love some styles I don't get into necessarily, but I love they're there, and I love trying them.
Yeah. I'm more of a purist.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't stand the innovation.
Yeah. You like what you like.
Yeah.
You like your brand.
I'll swap brands out all the time.
Okay.
And I will say I love Tim's. I mean, there's a lot of beers around here that I love, but if I'm up at Willow Rock, I love Congress.
Yeah.
Because I can drink 2 or 3 Congress and be fine.
That helps.
If I have like a half in the bag or a Mr. Zero, my wife has to drive home.
Yep.
So I'm not really, and that's only changed over the past year. Before that, I would have been all about some heavy IPA or whatever.
And I think a lot of lighter beers are starting to come back too.
Yeah.
Because of that. You get these higher ABVs, and they come in a 16-ounce can too, this. That's a lot of beer. And if it's, 9%, you can't have too many of them.
No.
Especially these smash mouth IPAs. If you have one of those before you eat dinner, you're not even going to taste your dinner. You're going to be having that hop in your mouth. So I guess there's a time and a place for everything. But I think the older I get, I'm starting to get into your camp. Like the lower ABVs, the less offensive ones. Not to say again, there's a time and a place for every beer, but That is nice, and that's that's an actual trend. People are starting to gravitate
Really?
more towards the lagers and the pilsners, the lower ABVs.
Yeah. I went to like a really nice restaurant in Lake Placid, Purple Sage Bistro, like a month ago when I was there. Really, high quality restaurant. Not like a fancy, snooty restaurant, just high quality. Chefs, extremely talented, been all over the place. And I ordered like a really heavy IPA as my first drink before dinner and immediately regretted it. I was like, son of a bitch. Because now I'm not going to taste, half of what I should
gone.
be. All right.
Yeah.
So that's changed pretty recently for me. I do like trying different beers. I'm not I've never been a big fan of stouts. I think it's just the sweetness of them.
Yeah.
But I've never been a big fan of stouts, but I'll drink just a little bit of everything. I have this video that I sent. So I'm friends with Tim from Buried Acorn and Keith at Woodland Farm, and we have a Facebook messenger chat going back and forth all the time. Usually just they make fun of me of all the dumb stuff that I post on Facebook. But I have this video I sent in my fridge. I had one of Tim's barrel-aged bottles and then a can of Bud Light.
Right now, were they touching?
Yeah. And I had like this video. I was like going back and forth trying to decide. And then I took his bottle and like shoved it in the back of the fridge behind like the old leftovers and grabbed the Bud Light and I sent it to him. So I will drink just about anything.
Yeah, he must have loved that one.
Yeah. But his barrel-aged stuff I really get into.
Yeah.
Some of that funky stuff I really like. But it's like the IPAs and the stouts I just can't really, not a massive fan of.
Yeah.
But they're, I was at a New York State craft beer meeting a few years back, and Big Mike from IBU was there, and, he was saying, I can't make the beer I want to make because it won't sell. So I have to continue to make these
The IPAs.
dumb IPAs because that's what everybody's buying.
I think it's 25 to 30% of the market now.
Is it really?
It's all IPAs. Yeah.
Wow.
And all the different styles of IPAs.
It's nuts.
Now add cold IPA to that list.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And somebody will come out with a hot IPA and make that a
Right.
thing.
Right.
Yeah. That, and yeah. So what's your take on the beer industry in, like, let's say in Central New York? Yeah.
One of the things I think, is I think Syracuse is really an underappreciated market. There's a lot of attention in Rochester and Buffalo and, maybe the capital region, but Syracuse is almost this under the radar type. And there's a lot of good breweries around in this area. And one of the reasons I wanted to start the distribution company here, not only do I live here, but it's really an untapped market. There's a couple of bottle shops around that are super popular. A lot of people go there. And there's a lot of people making good beer and a lot of consumers out there that want it. So it's a thriving community. And even, a lot of these little guys made it through the pandemic. So that says a lot about their customer base. So I think the future's bright, especially, across the entire state, I think the future's bright.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, malted beverages these days coming in, seltzers and, alcohol kombuchas and things like that, ready to drink beverages that are taking market share from beer. But I think beer is just a go-to for, generations. I think it's changed a little bit. People used to be super brand loyal back in the, Miller High Life days and things like that. But there's so many choices now. Beer is, there's cheap beer, there's expensive beer, and everything in between. So as I said, there's a time and a place for everything. And Syracuse, New York, I think is an underrated area, which I think needs to be brought out to the masses. And hopefully our distribution company can help with that.
Yeah. Beer is definitely some sort of a unifier. And, the greatest experiences with beer, the greatest beers I've had are often based on the experience, the thing that's happening while I'm drinking it.
Indeed.
A couple months of 2 months ago, sitting on my grandmother-in-law's back porch with my father-in-law and her, she's 80, drinking a Busch Light,
Nice.
in Iowa, my first experience. I think the first time I ever really had a beer that I could remember and enjoy, which is sad because I was super young. I think I was 14.
Nice.
Was a Labatt Blue, and I had like snuck 2 bottles from our like kitchen at our camp we were staying at.
Yeah.
And on this lake where we were at, we were on the point, so I had the drop off, and in Skinny Atlas, that drop off goes from 5 feet to slope that's down to 300. And so I stole these 2 beers, put them in a plastic bag, somehow got them all the way out to the point into the water, swam out like 20 feet deep, and buried the bag in the rocks. And then a couple hours later, I went and got my buddy, and we swam out there and went and got the beer and sat in the lake and drank them.
Awesome.
But that experience of having that beer, I'll never forget that. I forget the beers pretty easily.
Yeah.
Unless I see the repetition of the brand or the label or whatever the case is, or the ease of getting the beer. But the experiences, those are the things that kind of stick with me. So,
and that's the thing. Like, people will drink beer with friends.
Yeah.
There's people do drink alone, but the majority of the time you're with friends. You're out and about doing things, and
yeah.
People consume beer and alcohol in general, and in good times and in bad. I mean,
Yeah.
The pandemic. One of the first things the government did was to make breweries essential.
Right.
So it shows you right there.
And AA meetings non-essential, which was great.
Right.
Yeah. Liquor stores were essential. Yeah. It's, it is wild. I don't have a great view of beer in the area, of craft beer in general here in Syracuse. And maybe it is just because it's, it doesn't get enough attention. I don't know. We had an idea. I'm constantly trying to figure out like new ways to, like, a new business to start or whatever the case is. And so I had an idea over the summer to start, what we're going to call that, Upstate Beers.
Okay.
So like I'll be on GoDaddy and just type in ideas for domain names.
Yeah.
And if something's available that sounds good, I'm like,
Snag it.
oh, well, shit, I have to buy that and start the business.
Yeah.
And Upstate Beers was available. So bought it, and then I was like, okay, so here's the idea. We'll start a website that will just focus on promoting local breweries in upstate New York. And we'll just focus on blog content and, move into videos and all that kind of stuff, but just try and get the word out about all these breweries. So I had the idea, was kind of formulating it, and then I found out that 2 of those things already exist. What was the one? Was it? Yeah. Yeah, or Central ABC, the marketing agency ABC Creative had started it.
Okay.
And I think it's been around for a couple years, but it's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And it was going to be, theirs is done they haven't done anything in a year or so with it, but it was the exact same concept.
Yeah.
So, but I had already, talked to a freelance writer in the area who knows a thing or two about craft beer, and she was going to start writing for Upstate Beers. So I just shifted. I was like, you're going to do the same thing, just we'll put it on Eat Locals on our website instead.
Okay.
So she's doing, like, we do a weekly local brewery feature.
Yeah.
Really simple, just kind of like a paragraph on something interesting about their story, and then, here's what they serve, here's where they're at, just basic 411 type stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just don't feel like the local craft scene in Syracuse is really where it could be, where it should be.
Agreed. And I think, a lot of that is really, and I think it is kind of lack of exposure, kind of what you're saying. So they don't get as much hype. New York City is this big, sexy city, so they get a lot of hype down there. And, but a lot of these guys are starting to move up this way. Like Other Half has a place in the Finger Lakes, so their production facilities are all coming up north. So that can really only benefit us up here and just make beer more viable, more available to everyone around here. But the biggest thing that I saw, and this is something that I learned through my hop brokerage, just going out and meeting brewers and trying to sell them hops, is really this distribution thing, right? So if you can't get your beer out to people, you really just have a small radius around where your tap room is. And pre-COVID, that was fine. Your best margins are selling pints over your tap room. But COVID changed everything. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for these little guys now to kind of really expand their reach, via e-commerce, social media, things like that. It's just to enable, how do these guys get their beers out? A lot of these brewers are not only brewing by day, but they're bartending at night, and they're, self-distributing, schlepping kegs across town. They don't have time to set up an e-commerce website. They don't have time to market, so they need help with that marketing, getting the word out, which is what I hope we can do. So putting Central New York on the map is, one of our main goals.
Yeah. So because the system in place for distributors and brewers is pretty jacked up. It's kind of a crazy situation. So, well, tell us a little bit about the new business.
Yeah, so Drink New York Craft is kind of what I've been alluding to. It's it's a distribution company. We have a special license that allows us to sell direct to consumer. So we have an e-commerce website, and it's basically just a platform to, sell beer direct to consumer.
Did you have to? So is that a distributor's license that you have to have?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's the state views us as a wholesaler, but we're really allowed to sell as a retailer, which almost makes us two of the three-tier in the three-tier system, which is manufacturer, wholesaler, and retailer. We can almost act as two of those, which is kind of unheard of. But
does that mean you could sell to restaurants on behalf of the breweries?
We can. There's a little more with our particular license. We can sell direct to consumer as well as retails. It requires a different agreement with the brewers, and that's kind of treading on the territory of, I'm going to call it traditional distribution, where you have a territory. Right now, if you're selling direct to consumer, you don't necessarily have a territory. You can, consumers can be anywhere. So they're two completely separate things, but this one license will allow us to do both.
That's cool. So you have a website. You've partnered with different breweries in New York.
Yep.
And I can go on to your website, buy beer from those places, and have it shipped directly to me.
Yep. Yeah. The website's drinknycraft.com. And we're basically focusing on New York State only, because that's kind of my thing. We started the hop yard, and I have a passion for New York ingredients. I have a passion for New York beer. So we're kind of trying to keep it local, if you consider the entire state of New York local. So it's kind of bringing, the local feel statewide. So it's interesting to see who buys what. So it's like people in Camillus are buying beers from Syracuse through us when they could just drive down to the tap room. But we're also getting people from like Buffalo ordering Syracuse beers that they've probably never heard of.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping there's a little bit of an educational aspect to the site as well. Having people try new flavors, new brands, just seeing what else is out there.
Shipping's got to be crazy on that.
Oh yeah, shipping sucks. Yeah, shipping sucks. We ship via UPS, and it's probably the biggest headache out of this whole thing. They raise their prices on a weekly basis. They charge you absurd prices if you have a spelling mistake, and I don't enter people's address; they enter our address. So if it's entered wrong, it's a fee, for this fee for that. So we're playing with different shipping models. But that definitely eats into the margin. But I believe in the concept, and I believe in the convenience. And I think especially post COVID, when people are getting everything shipped to them, toilet paper, why not beer? You know, so it's just a convenience factor.
Does the customer pay for the shipping?
We'd eat a lot of it. The more you spend, the less you pay. It was kind of my hop experience. Breweries were willing to pay an extra, $150 to shave $20 on shipping. So through that experience, I'm like, if we can get shipping costs down, maybe work it into the beer a little bit, maybe eat some ourselves into our margin, then I think people will do it. So if you come on and you order a 4-pack, it's a loser for me to give you free shipping. But if you order $100 worth of beer, or a case or something like that, it's a lot easier to swallow that. So we have kind of a sliding scale.
I started a coffee company a year ago to I named it after my dog and after our dog. So it's called Good Buddy Coffee.
Okay.
Dumb, stupid idea. Don't ever fucking start a coffee
Don't ever
company.
do that. Noted.
The margins in coffee are stupid, ridiculously high. And I mean, I don't mind saying this. Maybe I should. I'm going to say it on the podcast. I pay like $3 for a bag of coffee, and they retail for 13, 14, $15. Mm-hmm. And then I have my bag and my label, but the shipping is what's so dumb, because a consumer doesn't want to pay $8, which is how much it costs to have a bag of coffee shipped.
Yeah.
And I don't want to pay for it because then I'm making $1 on every single order. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's really, really a big loser.
Yeah, it's
coffee.
probably the hardest thing that we're dealing with, especially alcohol too, because it's such a regulated thing.
Yeah.
You have to have adult signature required, which adds, I don't know, it's like $10 a package or something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head, but they need to be at their residence when the packages arrive, so they can sign for it, and that's an expensive service too. So
yeah,
you're lucky you don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, yeah, I am lucky. Yeah, I had when I first started the business, the thought was so I started it because I got hit with a Facebook ad for a coffee company in Los Angeles, and I only bought the coffee because the name was cool and so was the label, so was their bag, and I was like, oh, this seems like I'm going to buy this. And an hour after I bought it, I thought to myself, well, I wonder if that would work if I did it. So the downside is the name of my company isn't cool, and neither is my label. So maybe that's why they don't work. But the thought was I would just run ads in like Boston and New York City and Connecticut, like northeastern places.
Yeah.
And not try to steal business from the other local coffee shops that we promote. Mm-hmm. And it didn't work. So we stopped. Yeah. But yeah, the shipping on it just makes it like a business that really isn't viable unless you're massively scaled. Yeah. And, you just can't do that as like a solo person. It's like there's that really ugly phase that could last for a couple of years as you're trying to scale the business.
Yeah.
I
think we actually have an advantage because we're smaller, where I can play around with pricing models as opposed to being a massive bottle shop or something like that, where you might have inventory issues, or I ordered from one particular service. I'm not gonna say who, but I went through the order and I picked all the beers out that I wanted, which were very specific, and I got all the way to the shopping cart, and then it said at the end, we might not have these in stock. If we don't, do you want an equivalent? It's like, hell no, I don't want an equivalent. Like, I just spent the last 15 minutes picking out exactly what I wanted. I don't want an equivalent. Yeah. The box showed up. It was missing 3 beers because they obviously didn't have them in stock. And I didn't get a refund. I didn't get anything. So there's a lot of kinks to be worked out. So it's almost an advantage for us to be small, to not only know what's in our inventory, but be able to work out pricing models while we scale this up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, yeah. So what are, like, who are your bigger competitors? Like, I mean, I'm sure you probably compete with, physical locations, but online, who are those competitors? Just the national?
There's actually not a lot. There's a couple big ones. There's a guy down in New York City, Tap Room, TAPRM. They're pretty big. There's another one out of Poughkeepsie, Halftime Beverage. They started out as a pretty large bottle shop and got into e-commerce. But, I mean, the cat's out of the bag now. So I think right now it's just a race to market share. And whoever, can get the most customers right away is going to survive, because there's good people are going to be getting into this game. It's just inevitable.
It's just an expensive game to get into on that side, right?
Yeah, but we're lucky that excuse me, we're lucky we're even allowed to do this, because if you're in the spirit industries, you cannot ship direct to consumer unless you go through a distributor. So you're automatically eating, 30% of your margin right there. So we're fortunate here in the state that manufacturers can ship direct to consumer. So that is a nice thing to have.
So what if say? I mean, yeah, I'm fascinated by this business. So this is not a business podcast. I'm just really curious.
Sure.
So are most of your customers are you noticing so far in New York State, or are they outside of the state?
Right now we're selling in New York State only. So it's kind of New York focused, but we will eventually be selling New York beer outside of the state. It's just that every state has their own liquor laws.
Okay, yeah.
So you have to, call up Vermont and say, hey, what do I need to do? And then get licensed there, and then you can ship to Vermont. So that will happen. I just haven't. I mean, we've only had our doors open for a month now, and I haven't had time to actually do that. But
That's nuts.
yeah.
That's nuts.
So you'd have to call up 50 states. There's 50 different rules. Some are friendly and some are not.
Wow.
So,
That's insane. I mean, I guess I guess I kind of understand it to a certain degree. It's alcohol, right? But it's amazing how many things are still so difficult.
yeah, it's really not regulated on the federal level, so they just
Yeah.
they just pass it on to the states.
Yeah. Huh. Do you think, like, with, I mean, so many states have had, legalized, marijuana consumption and sales, and, New York State is obviously now new to the list. And, I mean, even in downtown, there's supposedly the old Urban Outfitters, that's a 3-story building, that's going to turn into a dispensary.
Wow.
And then down the street, the old Empire, which I don't know how you feel about Empire beer or not. We can leave this part off the podcast. Mark the time for me, Kristen. You're not related to him or anything like that. Okay, cool.
No.
But the old Empire, actually, we can leave it because I didn't say anything. The old Empire brewery is supposed to turn into like consumption business.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So, how do you think that's going to affect alcohol and beer sales?
To be honest with you, I don't think it'll affect it too much. Maybe so marijuana has been legal in Colorado for a really long time, and it hasn't really affected beer sales out there. So I assume if you're looking at Colorado as a model for the rest of us, there isn't much threat there. And plus, I think alcohol is a little different buzz than being high.
Yeah.
It is honestly, it's a little scary. If you make an alcohol weed beer, we're talking about 10% alcohol beers. Imagine like a 20% THC beer. What is that? I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. So, it's kind of an exciting horizon.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows where it's going to go? It's kind of the wild, wild west. It'll be interesting to see. I live in Cazenovia right now, and my town just voted that they don't want any dispensaries in Caz, and that's kind of interesting to me, because here's this tax revenue thing, and they could make money off of it. They don't even know what it looks like yet. They don't even know what the benefits are or what it even means or any of the rules are, and they're always saying no. We don't want this. Drugs, bad. Yeah. So who knows? I think it comes with this negative aura around it. It could be a good thing. Who knows? Time will tell. But it's happening everywhere.
Oh yeah, Cazenovia can be a rough place for businesses.
Oh yeah. There's Cazenovia is what people say. No.
I think like a town like that would do great with having a dispensary, because you'd have maybe not as many vacationers to a place like Cazenovia as you get to Skinny Atlas or like Lake Placid or something like that. But those people that are going there have a little bit more money, and some sort of a high-end dispensary would probably crush it.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? I support it. I don't know if I'd frequent it on a daily basis, but I would support it.
Yeah. I'm gonna grab another beer. You want one?
Yeah, absolutely.
You want the same thing, or do you want to try that?
I actually want to try one of those saisons if you would.
Yeah, it's I say unfortunately, unfortunately he gave me a case, because I'll drink. This is a terrible thing to say. I'd probably drink more beer in a day than I do water.
Yeah, there's water in beer.
Yeah.
You're good. You're getting hydrated.
I mean, I'll wake up and have a glass of water at night, and everything in between is coffee or beer.
Yeah,
which is awful. So that's why it's bad that he gave me a case, because I'll sit here being bored, or working one day, and I'll be like, oh wait, that's right, there's a shit ton of beer in the fridge just a few steps away.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, you asshole. I am still wearing your hat. Yeah, so I think it's, I don't know, it's going to be really interesting. It could just be, sort of to use to pull out a scripture. Jesus said a prophet isn't welcome in his own hometown. I feel like a brewery is not, idolized in their own hometown. Everybody's always, I should say, from my experience, everybody's looking at, making the brewery that's just out of reach the next greatest and best thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's probably fans of Willow Rock or, well, Buried Acorn now. Maybe they're going to have some German fan that's going to be a massive, bigger fan than anybody here in Syracuse.
Yeah.
But, so for me, I kind of look to some of the bigger ones like, Thin Man or, whoever they are, Beer Tree. And it's like, wow, they're doing amazing things. Look how cool they are. And I don't think that way about anybody in town.
Yeah, that's probably because you see them in Wegmans, because you see them out in distribution channels. So traditional distribution really caters towards scale. So if you're not at that scale, then you're not going to get out there. People aren't going to see you, and there's not going to be as much buzz about you.
Right.
But if you live in, say, Syracuse, and you know who Willow Rock is, you know, and you go there, and people like Willow Rock, you just have a smaller reach. And I don't know. In my opinion, that's almost beer geeks kind of think that's, cool, right? So it's like they discovered this particular brand and they brought it to their friends or something. And I've known people that have seen beers in Wegmans from some of their favorite brands, like, oh, it's in Wegmans. Now it's not on the do not buy list. Like, and that's taking it way too far, in my opinion. But I mean, there are people out there that do think that, oh, they're too commercialized. They kind of compare it to when, AB InBev or Budweiser purchases a craft beer brand. Goose Island is a perfect example. That's a craft brewery that was in the Chicago area. AB InBev bought them, and like everyone jumped ship. They changed the recipe, and they still sell it. You'll find it probably in the Carrier Dome, but it just wasn't cool anymore. So these little guys have a lot of potential. If you can expose them across the entire state. Say there's a little niche in Buffalo, they all of a sudden now know what Willow Rock is. Now they have that reach through e-commerce.
They've got some distributors, I won't talk too much about them, but they've got some distributors. They left theirs in Syracuse earlier this year, and they have to wait before they can go to somebody else. But they've got some that are like in the Pennsylvania and the Capital District and out in Western New York that, get their beer out there for them. Running their social will get tagged in Instagram stories from some of those bottle shops and stuff out there. And, that's pretty cool. And I try to, I've jumped in a little bit because I think it's fun and kind of exciting. I like the challenge, which is to, help like DM restaurants and try and, sell their beer for them, and talking to a couple places and about that, and like even emailing people I know, knowing what the big distributors do, and then those massive companies, Anheuser-Busch, what they offer. I mean, I have a buddy who runs a restaurant in town, and we were going to throw a party together, like a luau, and sat down with OnBev and said, hey, we're going to do this. Why don't we have it sponsored by Kona Brewing, because that's, OnBev, I think it's OnBev carries them. And, we need $2,000 for that. Great. Here you go. We'll give you a bunch of beer. We'll get all this merch out here, just yes, no question about it. Buddy of mine who has a local brewery in town questioned from a restaurant to sponsor their season-long thing for $1,000. And it's this... Nope. I don't know if we can do that, and that's one thing that they're really going against for sure.
Oh yeah. There's so much money in big beer, and they control the distribution, which is in turn holding the little guys down. I think this. I'm gonna get the stat wrong, but there's something like, I think it's like 80% of the beer market is owned by three different brands. So
Yeah.
AB InBev, Constellation Brands, and Coors Miller. So that's the rest of the 20%. I think there's 6,500 breweries in the country that make up
Wow.
20%. So there's a lot of room there, and there's a huge long tail.
Yeah.
And these guys are all making phenomenal beers.
Yeah.
They just need to have channels and avenues. And that was kind of one of the things. We're trying to start the Untitled distribution company, to kind of get these little guys out there. Because they're all making good beer, and people need to taste it. People need to know it.
Yeah. Kristen, will you do me a favor and mark down the time? I just want to make sure I clip that last part out for a promo later because that was pretty good. I'm hoping to, we've got all this production gear. Our hope is to, in the next month and a half, like rent out the Palace Theater and record these like 6 or 8 different hour-long episodes, interviews, and it's going to be me with 3 other people on like a panel. Round table really, and just have a discussion. And one of them, so we're going to do like local distillers, we're going to do local coffee roasters, we're going to do one on unemployment, one on how to open a restaurant,
Cool.
hopefully one on how to close a restaurant when you want to get out of the industry, and one with local brewers, and just to try and bring something different, some different perspective to the local beer industry. I think our local, and it could just be my example of the people that are far away, are better. But I think there's a pretty strong disconnect in the food scene and the beer scene in Syracuse. And I think that like in bigger markets where I have examples of like great breweries, there's usually some deeper connection between the food or the restaurants and the breweries.
Interesting. Yeah, you see a lot of food trucks and things like that. It's not real, high-class dining,
right?
A lot of these places.
Yeah, and I can tell you from example, food trucks do not do well at breweries.
Really?
Not at all. There's like 1 or 2 of them that do well, like 1 or 2 food trucks, and those are the popular food trucks anyways, like Bold Coast Lobster. They're going to sell out wherever they go. And I've heard some people do well at 315, but for the most part, all of the other breweries in town, food trucks do not do well at all. Especially this last year, food trucks coming out of 2020 and the pandemic were making a killing. I mean, they've never made as much money before in their lives as they did during the pandemic.
Yeah.
They were doing neighborhoods. They were doing private.
They got the bell in the neighborhoods driving around.
Yeah.
People chasing them down with their money.
Right. I don't know if Paul Valenti started it or who the first was, but your cul-de-sac, your whatever, your street, you would get all your neighbors like, hey, I'm thinking about calling Toss and Fire on Tuesday to come out here.
That's a great idea.
Do you guys want to do it? All the neighbors would jump in, and the food truck would show up with like 50 families guaranteed to come buy dinner from them.
Yeah.
Because nobody was going out to eat. They didn't want to go get takeout, right them.
That's awesome.
2021, even better. They were not only were they still doing some neighborhoods, but they were setting up at like the Great Northern Mall, crushing it. Corporations, businesses, bringing them in, paying them stupid money to feed their staff.
So what is it about breweries?
I don't know. I really don't. But they do not do well.
People are concentrating on getting their drink on, I guess.
I guess, yeah. Either that or the connection hasn't been made, to think like, all right, I'm going to go to this brewery that I know never has food. I know, like, you don't think, all right, I'm going to go there and eat and drink.
Yeah.
But yeah, none of them really, nobody's ever just killed it. Now, 3 years ago when food trucks were kind of like limping along and listen, if they could show up and make $300 or $400, it'd be like, hey, great. Because that's maybe what they're going to do on an average night at a brewery.
Right.
Maybe if they're lucky, they're going to do $1,000, but that's a great night.
Yeah.
So 3 or 4 years ago, they would have showed up to a brewery, no problem.
Yeah.
This past year, trying to get them to show up,
Not so much.
would not happen. Not at all. If they showed up to your place once and didn't do well, it was very hard. It was very rare that they would show up a second time.
That's a shame because it's very important for breweries. There's been a study that if you have food available, your customers will say, I think it's like 1.5 pints extra.
Yeah.
And then there's the the whole family factor. You're not going to a bar to drink, you're going out to eat dinner,
Right.
you know, and I'm going to have 3 beers
Yeah.
prior to that. So it's yeah, that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
And it is tough. I mean, there's not a huge profit in these places, and then it's not easy to get into them either, right? To get into the brew business, especially when you're talking about the taxes and the regulations, and so it's tough to really develop this out of the gate, state of the art, beautiful place that people want to congregate at.
Yeah.
There's Myers Creek, which does a great job. Like, it's gorgeous. I mean, they kind of, had a jump start already because they bought Empire, right? But they have this gorgeous facility. You want to go out there.
Yeah.
I've yet to meet a brewer in the area that has anything good to say about their beer, though. Oddly enough,
Yeah.
I don't know why.
They're okay. They do all right, but it's more of a, at least in Kaz, it's more of a destination. People are going there to eat the food, and it's
And hang out because it's gorgeous out there.
yeah, it is.
But they've got a shit ton of money,
oh yeah,
and not a lot of other local breweries around here get into the game with a shit ton of money.
Right.
What's that joke? If you want to have $1 million in your bank and own a restaurant, start with $2 million in your bank or something like that. It's probably worse, I'd imagine, for breweries.
Well, it's 2 separate businesses. You have to run them as 2 separate. You can't think they're the same thing. You have to have the front of the house and the back of the house kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's no other way to look at it. But if you do have that restaurant and it is good food, people will come and buy your beer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, Myers Creek definitely has that going on for them with the food. I mean, they have a gorgeous facility out there. Yeah.
it is.
And they're supposed to be opening up a second location here in the Inner Harbor.
I heard about it. It's just down the road from here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the Inner Harbor. They're opening up a smaller tap room here.
We'll see how that does.
I know.
Well, they going to have food there?
I don't know. I'm really happy. I'll be honest. I'm bummed to see that they're opening up another location here. And I've yet to meet somebody in the beer industry that would agree with me on this. The beer industry people say we welcome any craft brewery that wants to open up down the street, up the street, next to whatever. The more there are, the more interest there will be from the public.
Yeah.
I don't see how that makes any sense whatsoever. If somebody opens up another version of Eat Local, that's not going to drive more people to look for a discount card or look for local sources for, it's going to spread out my, thing. It's got to be the same thing. So I'm bummed to see that Myers Creek is opening in Syracuse. I'm
it'll
excited.
take away from others.
I think it will.
Yeah.
And to be frank, I think there's too many as it is.
Yeah. We're almost at the saturation point. I would think that, yeah.
I'm going to get a lot of shit for saying that, but I think that it is. So I'm excited to see that they're going in the Inner Harbor because that's an area that really has a lot of potential and needs to be built up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm bummed to see that they're going in there.
Yeah.
Heritage Hill is another one that gorgeous facility, another destination spot. They get shit on all the time for their beer.
Yeah.
And I
good food though.
Yeah. I don't get that. I don't know enough about beer to know why people shit on them, but people shit on them quite a bit. But another gorgeous destination spot.
It is.
So, So what do you see as what's well, I wanted to ask this question earlier. Has it been what's it been like reaching out to breweries to get them to be able to carry their beer? Are they like excited, open to it? Are they hesitant?
Yeah, really the only no I got right out of the bat was Tim. Hey, nice beer, Tim. Yeah, but he has so many distributors, that it wasn't a good fit for him, and I get it. But but yeah, pretty much everyone has been at least on board with it, with the idea. Because again, post COVID, if you're just relying on your taproom sales, you're kind of pigeonholing yourself. So you need to have alternative sales channels, and you need to have different ways to get your beer out to the public. So a lot of the guys, there's services out there that through your, your point of sale system where you run your credit card, you can have set up an e-commerce website and stuff, but those are difficult because no one knows they exist. No one's marketing them, so you have to have marketing dollars behind these e-commerce things. So that's kind of what I think we bring to the table. And it's kind of a no-brainer. So you show up and be like, hey, I'm going to sell your beer on the internet. Give me a couple of cases. I go, okay. I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't, you know? So we take kind of a hands-off approach where we're not locking these breweries in for their entire life savings and making them sign their lives away.
Yeah.
We're a little more relationship based. So plus I've had a lot of relationship with these breweries because I've been selling hops to a lot of them for 10 years. So I think that's helped kind of ease the tension a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's been a couple breweries where I kind of tell them they know me as the hop guy. And I show up at their brewery and like, hey, we're starting this distribution company. We're going to sell e-commerce. Oh, what a great idea. And the state liquor authority in New York State makes you have to sign a contract. So then you pull out the contract and you show it to them. I was like, oh my God, I never thought I'd ever be selling out. So there's kind of this hesitation to want to work with a distributor. And that's kind of why we call ourselves the distro distribution company, is to kind of help that mentality, because it doesn't have to be that way. There's more people that will benefit consumers and breweries than just the wholesalers. And the wholesaler is the middleman. No one even knows who they are. Do you know a wholesaler?
No.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a broken system ripe for disruption.
Yeah, it really is. And New York State's one of the more tricky ones, isn't it?
It can. There's just so many regulations, and it's really annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
I definitely don't envy you for that side of the business,
especially with alcohol, because alcohol is such a regulated thing. So there's been a lot of stuff. I'm still learning stuff like, oh, I'm supposed to be paying that over there. Like what? So we're making it through, but it's been a learning process.
How long was it from idea to implementation?
The idea was there pre-COVID. So I'd say, I don't know, maybe about 4 years ago, I probably were trying to think of something different. With the hops, I could have a really bad season and I could lose my crop and then I'm fucked, right? Yeah. So I've always been looking for something that could be complementary to what we were doing. I didn't really know what that was. But going around to a lot of these breweries, talking to a lot of these guys, the problem was distribution. Yeah. Same thing across the board. Distribution. Those bastards are doing this. They locked me in. Now I can't sell my beer in Onondaga. All the stuff. So I knew it was a problem. I just didn't know how to solve it. So I'm like, well, what I need to do is get these guys beer and sell it direct to the consumer for them. Yeah. So I thought of things like, drop shipping and things like that, which I guess is illegal. So that didn't work out very well. So I was trying to figure this out. And right before the pandemic hit, I figured, there was a certain license you could get that you could actually do this with. And then, so I had the ball in motion right before the pandemic. Then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, it is go time. Like, it is now or never. Yeah. Like, this is just, there was a lot of shitty things that happened with COVID, but with, market disruption like that, there's a lot of opportunities too. So we kind of took the ball and ran with it. If it wasn't for COVID, we'd be getting such pushback from, the wholesalers have what do you call it, a lobbying group, and they would have never have allowed anything like this. But because of COVID and the breweries were allowed to send beers out on their own, the cat's now out of the bag. So their lobbying group didn't really say anything. So we got the license, and floodgates were opened.
Wow. Yeah, there was definitely Buried Acorn did a great job in the middle of the pandemic getting the word out that they delivered beer.
Yeah.
I
remember seeing those Instagram posts all the time.
Yeah. And I ordered the most from them because it was so easy. They did such a great job.
Yeah.
There's a craft brewery in town. I ordered from them for delivery, and then like 4 hours later didn't show up. And when I called them, they were like, "Oh yeah, we don't do it on Sundays." but they didn't have anything in place to say that. Tim was just like Johnny on the spot. He did such a great job with
You got to
it.
do what you got to do.
Yeah, and he added in like a ton of low fills with every order and sticker. I mean, it was just, he did a really solid job with it. And I really wish that they had allowed that to continue because I feel like they lost,
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a different side of the business that could be, there for breweries. But it's
honestly,
cool.
I wish they could. I wish they could continue it too. And that, people would think that I'm an idiot for saying that because, it's not going to take away from your business. Yeah. Not really, because a lot of people still don't know that they can order beer on the internet, have it shipped to their house. Right. So the more people that know, the better. To be honest with you, I just started doing it a couple of years ago. When I started thinking about the idea, I'm like, well, who can do this? So I started ordering ciders and, wines just to see what the experience was. And it was awesome. Like, why did I not do this earlier? So I think people need to have that, why did I not do this earlier moment? Then they haven't had it yet. So if these breweries could do it, it would bring more awareness to the ability to do it. They could work the shippings out in their head, however they want to justify paying the shipping costs, and then have it done. Yeah. And then to be, honest with you, a lot of these smaller guys don't have the time to do it.
No, not at all.
So they'll end up going to a service like us to have it done for them. So I hope they bring it back, and they might. The Brewers Association is actually lobbying for that as we speak. So I hope it passes.
Yeah. What's it like on the hop side of things? Like, because there are a lot of local hop farms in central New York, especially in the Finger Lakes, correct?
Yeah, not as much anymore, but there are smaller ones. Yeah.
Are a lot of them like just growing for themselves, or a lot of them selling?
There was farm brewery legislation that was passed back in 2013, where you could open up a brewery with a farm brewery license and get some tax incentives for it. Yeah. The legislation has since been watered down a little bit, but the concept is still there and the license still exists. So that sparked a lot of hop farms. Cornell Cooperative Extension had a bunch of programs and really pushed people towards hops. So you saw these 1 acre hop farms popping up all over the state. They soon realized how difficult it was to grow hops, and it's very difficult to grow hops. And they realized that, 1 acre isn't going to cut it. You can't grow 1 acre hops and get rich. It's a very expensive habit. If you're making any money at all, you're putting all your time into it. So a lot of these smaller guys have been kind of going by the wayside as of recent. But there's still a market for New York hops. Yeah. There's still a lot of people that, really get into the local vor movement, really like to keep it low. They like to know where the food comes from, as I'm sure you know very well. And it's a story. So you go into the breweries and they can tell you a story. Hey, we got our malt from these guys over here, and we got our hops from these guys over here. And that's a cool story. New York beers tend to sell well. So
what's that percentage that they have to be? Is it
right now? It's at 60%. You have to have 60% hops, 60% malt, and other adjuncts. So
to be a farm,
strawberries and things like But now you can have a dual license. So basically, the breweries can have their cake and eat it too. Which is fine. Like a lot of people that buy hops from us buy the hops because they want to buy them from us, not because they have to. So it's the legislation did its thing back in 2013. And, if it were to go away tomorrow, I don't think the market would change at all.
Is that changing, though? Is it becoming more stringent to be a farm brewery? Don't you have to increase your percentage?
No, it's being easier. Well, it's supposed to go up to 90% at the end of this year, I think, but that's not going to happen. The Brewers Association is putting an end to it, and actually our hop trade organization supports it. We don't want it to go up to 90 because that will probably make less farm breweries. So if it's really just, again, it's telling that story. It's having that relationship with your brewer that really drives sales. It's not legislation.
Yeah. Are you selling hops specifically in New York, or do you get requests are you selling out of state? We got a little niche down in Rhode Island. I don't know how that happened. But there was a couple guys, I guess, lived in the area, so we have a little niche in Rhodey. But other than that, about 90% of our hops are all in state. Yeah, we just like to keep it local. Plus, we tell that local story. We use the word terroir a lot, and it's really
you know, it would be hard for me to call someone up in Colorado and
Yeah.
pitch New York hops to them. What do you say? I can't use the word local, you know, so it would be harder. So a lot of it stays in here. There's 480 breweries now, I think, in the state. And we don't grow enough hops to service, you know, 10% of them, you know, so there's no reason for us to leave the state.
So if you could if you snap your fingers today and change one thing in the world of craft beer in New York State, what would you change?
The entire craft industry?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Depends on what hat I'm wearing. You know, if I put on my hop hat, I would love for there to be a specific hop, like bred for New York, something that yields well, that's sexy, that belongs to New York. I think that would do wonders for that.
Because nothing really rivals in New York the West Coast stuff that everybody craves.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's not really quality because the quality is here.
Yeah.
It's really proprietary varieties. You know, if you think about certain hops like Citra, you know, you go into any brewery and they'll have Citra plastered around everywhere. So consumers are actually trained to go in there and ask for, what has Citra in it? You know, and it's the hop farms out west are brilliant because they market their product. And if you think about it, there's no other industry that really markets raw ingredients. The only I can really think of is, you know, back in the PC wars, you know, Intel Inside, right? Like Intel would market their processor chip. So people go to buy a computer. I want one with Intel, even though one with an AMD was the same thing. It's kind of like that. So people know this brand Citra, and we're not allowed to grow Citra hops here in New York State because it's proprietary. It was bred by someone private, and you need to sign your life away to even grow it. So it's just not worth it. So they control. Pacific Northwest right now is ripping out all of their, you know, traditional varieties and putting in all these proprietary varieties. And, you know, to be honest, I'm fine with that because Cascade is a tried and true hop. It's gotten a bad rap over the next couple of years, but mark my words, it's going to come back. And there's going to be a shortage of Cascade. And farms like ours, farms like New York, Michigan, Ohio, people outside of the Pacific Northwest are going to do well when that happens.
Was there any shortages on like you know, the world of hops over the past 2 years?
The Pacific Northwest been having, you know, they've had the fires. I think last year there was one particular windstorm that took out, I think it was something crazy, like 20% damage to their overall crop or something like that. Plus things now, drought. You know, they're doing water taxes out there where they're taxing farmers to use water. And so farmers are moving away from certain crops that are water intensive. Hops are very water intensive.
Are they?
They grow 18 feet tall. I mean, they're huge. So they take and they grow that 18 feet in the span of, you know, 4 or 6 weeks. So they require a ton of energy, ton of nitrogen, ton of water, ton of labor. And you know, out there, it's a desert climate. And if you don't water these crops, they're not going to do well. So if, it's going to become an issue.
Yeah, that's wild. I don't really have it. I've wanted to. There's a hop farm in Skinny Atlas.
Yeah, Skinny Atlas Hop Farm.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one. I don't know him. I've messaged him. I'm trying to get him on the podcast because I thought that would be interesting. And he, you know, maybe a month or two ago, I messaged him and he said, you know, once season is over, he'll reach out. And then, you know, Saul from Griffin Hill, you know, who I mean, that guy doesn't make a beer I don't like. And yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be fun to do one of the panels with like you, Saul, and the guy from Skinny Atlas Hop Farm.
Tim, Tim's a great guy. I love Saul. He does good stuff. He actually processes hops with us. Cool. Saul grows his own, so that's just pretty cool. And he brings his to us. Yeah, those are two great guys. That would be a fun conversation.
Yeah. So hops are essentially, you know, like the grain of the baking world. You know, it's like you know,
it's a sexy ingredient.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I was about to say, there is flour that's branded, but nobody goes into a bakery wondering what type of flour that they use,
Right?
unless it's like self-milled.
No industry.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other industry people go and ask for an ingredient.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they got to where they are, but that's brilliant marketing.
Yeah. I think your business model for the website for the sales for the beer is great, because you can really build a following up and then have this thing that like breweries almost have to sell through you because of the following that you have, like the reach that you'll be able to one day get them by just carrying their beer will be, unheard of, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more players than just us. And as I said earlier,
Yeah.
it's a race to market share. But I mean, at the end of the day, the craft beer consumer wins. And if we can bring down big beer and large distribution,
Yeah.
everyone's going to win.
Right.
So we're just trying to do our part.
Yeah. It's awesome. Well, where can consumers go and, buy beer?
drinknycraft.com. Yeah, right now we're about a month into it, so we're going to constantly be adding new breweries, new brands, new SKUs. There's a bunch of cool changes coming to the website. So what you see now is not what you're going to see next week or a month from now. It's going to keep growing and hopefully getting better experiences and more beers and happier people.
Yeah. We'll put links in the show notes for your social media. And if there's a local brewery that's listening, how can they get in touch with you to get their beer on there?
Chad at drinknycraft.com.
Sweet. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.